These are a few things that you probably should bring on your first multi-day hike. My name is Mia. I do long distance trails like the John Muir Trail and Tour de Mont Blanc. I love to be in the backcountry, find different ways to experience nature, oftentimes with a level of difficulty that many might not enjoy. And today I just wanted to go over some of my key items that I take on a multi-day hike. This obviously changes based on the environment that you might be in or the type of weather that you might be experiencing. But these are some baseline items that I would always take on a hike if I were to go out the backcountry. Whether I'm in Texas or in California, I think that a lot of this gear will apply. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with our gear. What kind of gear I have doesn't have to be the same kind of gear that you have. In fact, you can find a lot of these as basics at Walmart, and feel free to purchase those before you're ready to commit to the craft because it can get really expensive. The first thing you need to understand about backpacking gear is the concept of the big three. The big three will consist of your backpack, your sleep system, and your shelter. For me, I have the Hyperlight 55 liter. It's going to be a very simple backpack with minimal organization options. I personally love it, but for my first JMT hike, I did use an Osprey 65 liter pack, which looked huge on my frame. I'm only 5'2", but it was great for being a beginner. It's a lot more structured than the pack that I'm showing here, but I chose the Hyperlight in the end because it's made of a Dyneema composite. It's very light and also waterproof, so I don't need to wear this duck back that you'll see me wearing in a lot of different hiking videos. I also have the Nemo Disco 15 degree. You want it rated for the level of comfort that you want, not for the minimum level of degree. What that basically means is you'll see like this is a 15 degree rated sleeping bag. That means I can go down to 15 degrees in this bag. I won't be comfortable at 15 degrees. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for a bag. The next thing is going to be your sleeping pad. I use the Rapide blow up pad. I love this. It's not as expensive as the most lightweight blow up pad, but it's not as cheap and as uncomfortable as a closed cell phone pad. I've used the cell phone pads in previous through hikes and just found that they're not as comfortable for me. They're really convenient, but I don't love feeling my shoulders in the morning hitting the dirt. So I have switched over to the closest thing I can get to a backcountry mattress. And then of course, in our big three, we still have our tent. For my shelter, I use the Quarter Dome SL1 and occasionally the SL2, depending on how many people I'm taking on a backpacking trip. For your shelter, you might want to go and purchase a used or new backpacking purposed tent. The reason for this is they're a lot smaller and lighter than a traditional camping tent. Traditional camping tents are actually really difficult to pack. They're bulky, large, and often have huge stakes that require you to bang hammers into the ground. Realistically, you won't have access to a lot of those tools when you're on a multi-day hiking trip. So I would bring something a little bit more accessible. So the reason why these are called the big three is because they are non-negotiable. For the most part, some may argue differently. You want a shelter, you want somewhere to sleep that's going to be comfortable, and then you need something to carry all of your stuff in. My suggestion for a lot of these items is go get fitted at REI. They will go ahead and bring you to either the most beginner-friendly option or make sure that the pack you are utilizing and the sleep equipment that you're utilizing is fit exactly for your needs. If you're a light sleeper, a cold sleeper, a hot sleeper, they'll be able to find the right equipment that will fit all of those criteria. Okay, so now that we have the big pieces, or the most obvious pieces taken care of, these are some of the more niche items that you might use on a backpacking trip. It depends on what kind of trip you're doing, but let's assume that you're going on a 1 to 2 day hike in the backcountry. You're going to need a cook set, some sort of toiletry, and your clothing. As far as our cook set goes, our cook pot is the Snow Peak aluminum set. I actually don't really like this cook pot. Heard great things about the Jetboil. It's a little bit heavier, but utilizes a lot less fuel or gas. I always have at least one lighter. It's simple, it's easy to use, easy to light my stove. And I always bring a set of stormproof matches. This is just in case it starts to rain or for some reason my lighter stops working. I want to have a more robust way to light my stove. The stove, I actually have the old MSR Pocket Rocket. They make a new version of this and it's much, much better, smaller, lighter. But this one works just fine for me. I've been using it on all my through hikes and very tight. You just screw it onto a gas canister, which I don't have here, but you will need a gas canister if you plan on using a stove. I also use this collapsible Sea to Summit mug. This is kind of a luxury item. I just really love being able to have my cup of coffee and oatmeal in the morning separately. I don't want to have my coffee and then wait for me to finish it before I have my breakfast. So it's more of a convenience thing, but it's very lightweight. This big piece is going to be your water filters. This really should be part of the big three. This is pretty non-negotiable for the backcountry as long as you're not packing in your water, so taking literal jugs. If you're collecting water on trail through a lake, stream, river, or a suspicious source, you absolutely want to be using a water filter. The most popular is probably going to be the Sawyer Squeeze. All you need is a smart water bottle with a fitted cap, and you can screw this on. The water bottle basically weighs nothing, costs nothing, and the filtration itself will filter as you squeeze through the bottle. So you can both drink from it directly and you can squeeze it into a pot for boiling your water. You'll also need some sort of headlamp. I would also put this under a non-negotiable. I love my headlamp. This is a black diamond, very simple. You can buy these for around $30, $40. These are just great because you can wear it and see everything that you're doing without worrying about holding a flashlight up. So it serves a lot of different purposes. Of course, you have your toiletry or your hygienics. This will depend person to person. A lot of people will cut their toothbrush in half like I did here. It's wholly unnecessary, but if you're worried about every ounce, then you can. You'll see that I also have some hair ties. Sunscreen is pretty non-negotiable, and some toothpaste. You might want a more robust kit, like a hairbrush, or maybe you have some medication that you have to take daily. Feel free to throw whatever you really need in here. There are ways to pack it, like Ziploc baggies, that make it a little bit more efficient and better for weight. But this is where you can kind of be a little excessive. Now, where I would urge you not to be excessive is your first aid kit. People tend to overpack their first aid kit because you want to be prepared in case someone were to get hurt or sick. For your first aid kit, you really only need some moleskin, a couple band-aids, just minor items. The reason for this is the likelihood of you getting hurt is low, and if you do, it's more important that you have an SOS device, like a Garmin or a Spot. These are basically satellite signal devices that allow you to text friends and family and call for SOS if something terrible were to happen. That will be more helpful than having a splint in your bag. Trust me, it's at a bag shakedown spot, that's the first thing that goes is some crazy first aid kits. Now let's dive into clothing. So to each their own with clothing, but I personally make sure that I have just one of everything besides socks and underwear. You can have up to 2 or 3 pairs of those. Hopefully you're washing them in between uses, if possible. You do need a base layer, something that you can wear at night separately from what you hike in during the day. I like to bring a pair of leggings and then just wear whatever shirt I've been wearing. You can also bring some sort of long sleeve depending on the environment that you're going to be hiking in. I also make sure that I always have a buff or a hat of some sort, something to cover my head, and make sure that I'm keeping my skin as healthy as possible while I'm in the backcountry, which can be really difficult. And like I said, I tend to bring 3 pairs of socks, which is a little bit excessive. You could probably bring 2, but I like to have 2 active socks that I rotate between for hiking, and then 1 pair of wool socks specifically for sleeping. I also always bring a down jacket. I kind of see this as a non-negotiable no matter where you're camping. I found that a down jacket is the one thing I wear every single night. It also will serve as a wind barrier And then something I don't have pictured here, but you might want to bring if you're on a very rainy area or a very wet trail, you probably want a rain set. And then of course, we can't go in this section without talking about footwear. I only bring 2 pairs of shoes on the trail ever. A lot of people like to have some sort of camp shoe and of course your hiking shoe. Both are under debate for what kind you have. I use Tevas, always have used Tevas. I just really like being able to wear my socks with them. I can fully strap my feet in. And then for my hiking shoe, I use trail runners. First few through hikes, I was diehard boots. And then of course I started using trail runners, realized how much lighter they were, how much better my feet felt, how many less blisters I had, and officially switched over. Again, if you find a pair of boots that are really comfortable for you, or you've been wearing the same pair of boots for the last 20 years, feel free to use whatever you're most comfortable with. All right, so finally, we've moved on from our gear to food. Food is, again, very subjective, depends on what you like, what you don't like. It's called hiker hunger, and it refers to the insatiable hunger that you'll feel after being on trail for a couple days. On a 2 to 3 day hike, you might not experience it, but you'll still be burning lots of calories. So the best way to go about this is making sure you have dense food. The most dense is going to be nuts, peanut butter, trail mix, those kinds of things. But you can also throw in a couple of different options for snacks. I really like Builder's bars and Kind bars, both some variation of nuts. I like to do a lot of candies and some sort of gummies. Also, keep in mind, for backpacking, you really only have 2 options. You can either have hot food with a stove and boil water, or you could cold soak your food, which basically means still adding water, but allowing it to soak throughout the day. I prefer to cook. I think that it's more fun to have a hot meal at the end of the day. You do have a choice between the store-bought freeze-dried meals like Mountain House dinners that you might find at REI. They're really fun and they are really tasty. The only thing is it's almost $10, $12, $15 per pouch. So I tend to stock up on instant ramen, things that are a little bit more accessible, mac and cheese, basically anything that's going to be quick and easy for me to prepare, and boiled noodles tends to be in that category. So now let's go into a little bit about the trail, best hiking practices. I won't spend too much time here because it depends on the park that you're currently hiking in or just the wilderness area. First is, do you need permits? You can see if the trail that you want to hike requires a permit by looking it up beforehand, or even just getting to the trailhead and either asking a ranger for a permit, walk up one, or for some overnight camping spots, you just fill out a placard and put that in your car before leaving. Next is hygiene. The obvious question is, what do you use to go to the bathroom? And this is where your kit comes in. Basically, this consists of a trowel, which I don't have pictured here, a Ziploc bag, and some toilet paper. That's pretty much it. Just be sure that everything you pack in, you also pack out. You don't want to leave any toilet paper behind. I know that's not ideal, but that is how things work. If you're wondering how to choose your first hike, a really good way to do this is use something like AllTrails or Strava. They're both tools that have predetermined routes people have already taken or that somebody has already maintained. And finding multi-day treks is really easy. Just make sure you set the miles, check the box for backpacking. This will just ensure that AllTrails is only showing you places with either wild camping or designated tent sites that you can start using. And then, of course, your physical, mental fitness. Do a shorter hike. Don't push yourself to do 12, 14 miles plus for your very first through hike or very first backpacking trip. Do something shorter. Do something more accessible. Do something like 7 miles, 2 to 3, 3 to 4 a day. And by the end of it, you'll be ready to do a little bit more. You'll say that wasn't long enough, and you can start extending it every trip after. This will just make sure that you aren't overwhelmed by backpacking the very first time. Sometimes when you push too hard, it gets a little bit difficult to push yourself to go out again. And my goal is to keep you guys outside as long as possible. Not because I don't want you inside, but because I feel that if everyone backpacked, the world would be a much happier place. The last thing I wanted to cover is have fun. This is a great opportunity to meditate, skinny dip, and just generally be free. Being on a multi-day hike is great for seeing places that you might not see by car, but also just enjoying how quiet it is, how beautiful the stars are, and how wonderful the world is. There are some places that are filled with pavement and roads and you can't fully appreciate all those things. We still have ways to experience them. You just have to put in a little bit of effort. Okay, so now hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared to go on your first trip. My goal again is to get as many people out to the wild as possible. I personally love backpacking. I love multi-day hiking, but nonetheless, thank you guys so much for being here. I am trying to be a little bit more consistent with posting my own documentaries and filmmaking that I do on trails. If you have any questions for me or specific questions about backpacking, go ahead and leave them below. I'm happy to answer as many as possible. And with all of that out of the way, go enjoy.